Namaste, Sasrakal and Salam friends. Welcome to yet another episode of the talk show Sergeant Nair, Tourism, Hospitality and Aviation. Today I take immense pleasure to introduce our guest, Mr. KCR Raja. He is a veteran in the field of education, business, consultancy and social entrepreneurship. Has experience for more than 4 decades. He has enriched background of qualification from India and abroad. He is the founder director of the University of Mumbai, Garwar Institute of Education and Development, the first institute started by the university in India to offer career education to the graduate and postgraduate level. Presently, he lives in Bangalore and works as a mentor for senior executives in a few startups and to non-business ventures in social entrepreneurship. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Sajjan. Pleasure to be with you.
Sir, today's discussion will have 2 areas of your expertise. One is, of course, the current education policy 2020. And then we'll focus on how education policy has been and will be in terms of women empowerment is concerned. These are 2 areas that we will cover today in the discussion.
Okay.
All right. So first question, of course, an overview of what is this this policy, education policy 2020, and how is it different from earlier ones?
The new education policy, which was drafted, I think by the end of last year and submitted to the government, has been approved by the cabinet with some very minor modifications, and is now ready for implementation. Now, if you look at it, it represents, to me, it represents a very radical departure from the previous national education policies that we have had. And we have had quite a few. In fact, way back in 1960s, 1956, 57, I think, there was the Kothari Commission, which was a national education policy, which was brought out by them. Later on in 1984, under Rajiv Gandhi's prime ministership, there was a national education policy, which I thought was a very good document, which was one of the best critiques of our education system that we have had. But unfortunately, if you look at these policies, if you look at these documents, you would find at least, I think, 3 major differences between them, their approach, and the approach of the present national education policy. And I'll tell you why it was necessary to have a new policy altogether. In my view, and this might sound a little odd, but I have always held that the education system that we have had so far is a system that we have inherited from the old British legacy. And it was geared more for the problems of yesterday than for the opportunities of tomorrow. And I think it's for the first time that we are thinking in terms of a policy that is looking at the opportunities of tomorrow and not the problems of yesterday. The earlier policies focused more on equity and access. How do we improve the total enrollment ratio? How do we get more children into schools? And how do we give them equal opportunities? I think that was the major concern of those 2 policies. And quite naturally, this present policy deals with a generation which has been born and nurtured in the internet era, in a technology environment, which is totally different from what they've had. In 1986, there was no internet to talk about. So it's a totally different ball game altogether. And you have today children born today or born, let's say, a few years back, will probably go into technologies that have not been invented so far. They'll probably get jobs which do not exist today, maybe in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in 3D printing, a whole lot of things which don't exist today. And therefore, these opportunities, if India wants to be at the forefront of technological development, these are the things that need to be addressed. And therefore, we have an education policy which focuses on today's problems and tomorrow's problems, and which wants to develop the uh, individual. As they say, they have put out a vision mission statement, which they say, we are looking at the full development of human personality, a holistic development, in line with the aspirational goals of the 21st century. These are exactly the words. So they want an education policy which is in line with that, and which will give our children equal opportunity for development. So there are many things which distinguish this policy, and I think it's a very radical departure. Of course, as they themselves say, the uh, success of this policy, or any policy for that matter, would depend on the quality of implementation. And that is something which we are going to see. But I won't go into all the aspects because we don't have time for that. Let me just pick up 2 or 3 things. The first thing that they have emphasized is what they call foundational skills. And this is very important. You see, about 85% of the development of the human brain takes place before the age of 6. And therefore, they say that if you take care of the child right from birth till the age of 6, then you at least give the children an opportunity to be on par with each other. If you don't do that, then some people lag behind the others permanently for the rest of their lives. So they want all children to be, and this is an entitlement. This is not merely the right to education. This is an entitlement, a promise that is being given to every child in India. And it covers not merely education, it covers nutrition, it covers health, the total development of the child. And if the state takes the responsibility for that, it's a great, great responsibility. And as they say, it means a lot of funding. And if this is done, what they call the foundational skills are developed, then the rest of it becomes easy. So this is one of the distinguishing marks of this policy. Second, they have, when you come to the college stage, they have introduced a 4-year college structure instead of a 3-year one. You have a 3-year degree course now, they have a 4-year course. I think that also makes sense. And at the same time, they are also offering multiple exit options. At the end of the first year, if you complete the first year and you exit, then you get a diploma. At the end of the second year, you get an advanced diploma. At the end of the third year, you get a degree of a particular kind, maybe be vocational or be in a particular science. And if you complete the fourth year, then you get a degree in liberal arts. And you need only 1 more year to do your MA, postgraduate course. So this is also a major departure. Then total integration of vocational education with general education, of science with arts, of extracurricular activities with curricular activities. So there will only be one general stream, and within that stream, you will have multiple options for development. And then the degree granting status will be given to all institutions, not merely universities, which fulfill certain criteria. That's another thing. And then, of course, the whole structure, your UGC, AICTE, all those things, that totally changes. There will be no AICTE. The UGC will be just it will be given another name, but it will be a funding agency. And you will have a national testing agency. And you will have a national accreditation agency. There will be just 4 streams, 4 verticals. These are the sort of changes that are being brought about. And as I said, it all depends on the quality of implementation. But this government seems committed to that.
So, a student's point of view, since you use the word vocation, what is the difference between vocational learning, studying, and a career education? What's the major difference in the two? And student's point of
Okay.
view. Yeah, basic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. You know, these words, vocational and career education, have admittedly have been used interchangeably. People have used it interchangeably, but we have, I have personally preferred to use the word career education for what the courses that we had developed. You mentioned the Garware Institute,
Yes.
of which I was, with which I was
Yes.
associated. Yeah, we used the word career education. We called it the Garware Institute of Career Education and Development, not of vocational education, because we thought, and at least uh, in those times, it was, I think, very valid. Vocational education focuses on skills development, specific skills which are meant for specific vocations. Whereas career development prepares you for life, prepares you for development of yourself in a career. And today, when you talk about a career, it's not just one career. A career is a combination of vocations. You might start with one vocation. You may not stay there. You might start as an electrical engineer. You might be something else 5 years later. I can give you a couple of examples. I have known a person who came as a food technologist. He was a food technologist. He worked as a food technologist in a packaging company where he was, studying the compatibility of food with packages. From there, he went to another company where his main job was to buy packages. And they were a food company. So he moved from food technology to buying. And from buying, he moved to general management. And from there, he went to a company, a tea company, and he became the chairman of the board of directors. It's another person who did his chemical engineering from an IIT. He worked in a food company. He had also taken as part of his courses computers, IT. So he was involved in IT and its various ramifications. So he went from there into software engineering. From software consulting, he went into financial consultancy services, financial consultancy to financial telecommunications.
My God.
At each stage, he was trained by the company, from financial telecommunications to telecommunications proper. And today he's working in the 4G, 5G frontier research. So that's a kind of career growth that takes place. So today, when you're talking about a career, you're talking about not just one skill. You're talking about multiple skills. A person who does his electrical engineering would do well to do, let's say, a course in Amazon's computer storage, cloud computing, and things of that sort. So career education is more inclusive, in my view, than vocational education. But at the same time, the new education policy describes vocational education in a slightly broader sense.
So you also spoke about implementation of these policies and plans. So does India have the structure as such, to implement vocational studies on the floor as compared to other countries, especially like China or someone? Are these strong enough? Those infrastructure in place?
We have made efforts. We have had uh, institutions offering vocational courses like ours in Bombay. But I would say that these have been sporadic efforts. At the national level, vocational education has been talked about for a long time. In every 5-year plan, it finds a page. The Kothari Commission talked about vocational education, talked about introduction of vocational education in higher educational institutions, but nothing much happened. There was the National Skills Foundation, which was set up. Uh, and that too has not really done much. So far, vocational education has not really come up compared to other countries. See, in UK, you have the National Vocational Qualifications Network, NVQs. And you have the NVQs, of course, are recognized in about 150 countries. And promoted by the City and Guilds, recognized by the government of UK. for employment purposes recognized by industry, because industry is involved in running. In Germany, on the other hand, they were a totally different model. They have the apprenticeship scheme, whereby government have made it mandatory for industries to take children as apprentices. So they have that. In the US, you have the community colleges. The community colleges where dropouts from schools can go, where people can go after school, the school stage. And then a 2-year community college courses are generally of the duration of 6 months to 2 years. But if after that, and you know, in the US, the problem has been school dropouts. It's probably as bad as it is in India, largely because of single parent families and a whole lot of other problems. School dropout is very high. And the community colleges were uh, originally thought of for such school dropouts. But then later on, if you want to go uh, into college, into the university, and uh, get a degree, then there is a mechanism by which the credits that you've earned are recognized, and a 4-year degree course you can do in 2 years, a transfer degree program. So there are various models, and we don't have anything compared to that. See, the problem, okay, the problem in India is very high dropout. The enrollment ratio starting at about 90%. By the time you finish your 11th or 12th standard, it comes down to 50. 50 is the official figure, it may even be low. By the time you enter the college, it is less than 25, which means that out of 100 students who join the school, only 25, less than 25, reach the university. And what do the others do? They don't get any skills. They don't get the opportunity to develop skills. And so they join the ranks of unemployed and unemployable labor, unskilled labor. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have faced. And that is what they're now trying to address.
So, since you spoke about vocational training, your point of view, when should we start in a curriculum? What is the right time to start the vocational training for a student's point of view as such? Parents would like to know.
Okay. Right now, as things stand, there have been, the Directorate of Technical Education in every state tries to introduce some vocational courses in the 10th and 11th standards. But they are, nobody is very serious about it. Neither the students nor the teachers. And they don't have trained teachers to teach them also. So what's actually happening is that some institutions like the Garwar Institute offer vocational education after the 11th standard. What is now being proposed is that from the standard 9 stage, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, vocational, at least one vocational course should be taken by the student. You will have a bouquet of vocational courses, and each student will take one vocational course. And it doesn't mean that he will remain in that course. He can, of course, move from one to the other. And but at that stage, he will get a taste of it, and he will get some opportunity for practical training. And if he wants to move into the vocational stream, he has the option to do that. So I think 9th standard it's okay. If you are in the 9th standard, you will already be 12 or 13 by then. So you will at least see the advantage that you'll be made to think about a vocation. You'll be made to think about your future and your career.
Right. So moving away from that, we come to present scenario is COVID, and we have a lot of online courses and a lot of things happening in that arena. So, what are your views on that? One, and two, what are challenges that we face as far as education is concerned?
Of course, COVID has been the most disruptive force that we have had for a few centuries. We've seen disruptive change, but this has absolutely been shattering. It has shattered our lives. It has shattered the way that we work, the way we live. And education has certainly been affected very badly. Overnight, within a matter of days, 4 days, 5 days, you've been asked to move from face-to-face learning to online learning. It's one of the, I know most institutions, either in India or abroad, were ready for that. So we call it online learning, but it's not online learning. It is just classroom learning that is being offered through Zoom or offered through some other platform, video conferencing platform. That is not learning at all. In fact, I still want to know, I don't think any assessment has been made of the outcome. How successful is it? You see, face-to-face learning has certain advantages. The intimacy of the classroom, the interaction that takes place between the teacher and the student, and between the student and the student, and the learning that takes place. The ability to give instant feedback, and particularly where skills are concerned, you're being able to do something with your hands on the job and being supervised, guided, and assessed on the spot. These things you can't do online. So online education has its advantage purely in terms of convenience, in terms of cost, in terms of saving time. And it's bound to stay. I'm sure that even when we come to the new normal, which we don't know when it'll come, but when we come to the new normal, we still have online learning. And we would have probably permanently shifted to online learning. But as we progress, we will find that the content and delivery of online learning will have to change drastically. It'll have to be a totally different game altogether. You see, even in a classroom, you would have found, because you've been a teacher for a long time, that the span of attention of a student is not more than 20 minutes. And when you lecture, at the end of 20 minutes, you'll probably want to give a pause of, let's say, at least half a minute. And you would want the students to give you a feedback. You would put a question. You will ask the students to, you will at least test, find out whether they have been listening, whether they've been understanding what you've said. And then you go to the next segment. So if it's a 1 hour class, you have 3 segments. If that is so in a classroom, what would it be like online? So you will have to have short segments. And in between, to hold their attention, you will have to introduce some video clips, you will have to introduce some pictures, stories, and something about what has been happening elsewhere and so on, which means the teacher will have to do a lot of work. Not merely the teacher, but those who design the curriculum. So it'll be a different kind of learning altogether, a different kind of teaching. I guess that it'll be a hybrid kind of a learning, maybe 25% online, 75% face-to-face, or 40, 60, or somewhere around that, and it may differ from course to course. But both are bound to stay, in my view.
So we come to the last segment, the second segment of our interaction, and that is education policy and women empowerment. This policy, anything specifically for women empowerment, anything that encourages, and how has it been in the past and what is going to be the future?
Yes, if you look at the policy, you don't find a separate chapter on women's empowerment, but they do discuss women's empowerment in terms of improving the reducing the gender disparity that exists and making women more involved, more empowered through education. See, you will find at the moment, only last week, the National Statistical Office published some figures on gender disparity in education. If you look at the All India figure, the disparity between male literacy and female literacy is about 14%. Male literacy is about 85%, and female literacy is 71%. The highest or the lowest disparity, the lowest gender gap is in Kerala, where it's only 2%. Male literacy is 97.4%, and female literacy is 95.2. So both are very high, and the disparity is very low. Whereas if you look at Rajasthan, for instance, the gap is 23%. Male literacy is 80%. Female literacy is 57%, 33%. So if you look at Rajasthan, Bihar, and Madhya Pradesh and so on, it's very high. So this is one of the problems that we still have to solve. And therefore, the new education policy stresses the need for creating the right environment in which women can participate more in education, that they can be enrolled. Women's enrollment ratio is also lower than that of men. So they are, one of the things that they've is setting up a special fund, special gender inclusion fund, which will be set up by the central government and which will be disbursed by the state governments also, to specially help women get educated, to create the conditions of safety, of security, of gender sensitization, as they call it, in schools, so that the parents feel that the children, the girls, can be sent to school and should be sent to school. And that can do wonders. I have seen this. I have seen this happening in some of the villages, where women who have passed 11th and 12th standard are more aware of their duties and responsibilities, are able to work, are able to assert themselves. And I've been to one of the interior villages in Karnataka, where I saw the girls being helped by a company there with microfinancing facilities. And we asked one of them, I didn't even know the language. So I asked them, how has life been different for you in the last 5 years? So she said, promptly, spontaneously, she said, well, I'm more respected by my mother-in-law. So I said, why? She said, I'm an earning member and they depend on me. So you see, that's the kind of difference that can help. Yeah, yeah.
Sir, my question is women education, women's status as compared to other developing nations. Because you have been in the education space for 30, 40 years. How has India been, and how do you look at the future of this is concerned next 10 or 15 years time, women empowerment in particular?
I think the women's participation in the workforce will improve dramatically with more opportunities coming to them. As it is, you find over the last, I have now been looking at the educational landscape for more than 30 years, 30 or 35 years. And the kind of change that I have seen even in not merely in, what's called the brain intensive jobs, maybe in training, education, or the desk jobs, not merely in those jobs, but even in the factories. You find more and more women going for engineering, more and more women going into space technology. You look at ISRO, you look at other organizations, in anything that you think of. And today, the new manufacturing revolution is bringing in the kind of jobs that are ideal for women in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in 3D technology, nanotechnology, and so on. And I think they would probably make a more significant contribution, or as significant a contribution as men do. And India will not be anywhere behind the other countries in that respect.
So my last question, we have left on one portion. We have spoken about policy, we spoke about the plan, we spoke about how to implement it. The role of industry, the role of the business houses in making, in this last question, in making the syllabus, in making of the young India is concerned. What are your views on that?
Yes, I think none of these things will really work, particularly in vocational education or in any kind of skills training, unless industry is intimately involved. And I've seen industry involvement helping the country, not merely in terms of just manufacturing or in the service sector, but in terms of contribution that they make beyond the boundaries that they have set for themselves. And one of the things that could be done is you now have the CSR responsibility, corporate social responsibility. Under CSR, the companies uh, could be made to be made partners in the educational effort. See, the new educational policy talks about incentivizing companies to come and take apprentices. I don't think that's enough. I think what we should do is, like the Germans, uh, it has happened voluntarily in UK and USA, but we could ask the companies and say, we will recognize this as part of your CSR effort. Ask the companies to sign an MOU saying, we will help in designing the curriculum, because they know they can do the competency mapping that is required. They can list out the competencies required. And that's a starting point. From the competencies, you design the training program, and they can give job training. They can do the assessment, because the industry will set the standards by which, because they are going to take these students, the standards which will decide whether the student is competent enough to take a particular job has to be decided by the potential employer in collaboration with the academics. So if you want the ideal combination of theory and practice, of the application of theory to practice, you need industry at every stage. And if we can make this apprenticeship scheme as part of our approach to vocational education, I think that'll be a great step forward. Industry will come forward. It has to be done at the state level. It has to be done even at the district level. And industry must cooperate also in carrying out a mapping of local job opportunities. I have seen the community colleges, because they are funded by the county, the community colleges doing a manpower study before they decide on any course, on starting a course. And the same thing can be done at the local level. So the courses which may be required in, let's say, a district in the Majority district or part of it in Tamil Nadu may be quite different from the courses you made in Chhattisgarh or some other state. So this has to be done, and industry has to participate in this. I don't see any problem in this, but it requires vigorous marketing of education and educational institutes to industry.
It's a very interesting interaction. We have spent 30 minutes in all. We're talking right now. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Pleasure.
This edition will go on air on the eve of World Tourism Day. That's the reason why we kept the theme as women empowerment. And that's why I was asking questions on that regard. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sergeant. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye, sir. Bye-bye.